So good morning. Can you please introduce yourself and describe what you do?
I'm Phoebe and I'm an artist.
And what sort of work do you make?
At the moment, I'm actually painting a lot, which is quite new, really, and working with ceramic sculpture.
And how do you position your work? Where do you, without wanting to pigeonhole, where would you position and categorize your work?
I think I'm realizing more and more that I feel like I'm in a very early stage of and probably can't necessarily categorize my work. I think part of it's quite part of it's sort of led a lot by emotion, and I guess trying to inject some sort of emotional energy into materials. So whether that's clay, paper, linen, oil, and then the other side of it is sort of, I guess, quite active, thinking about activism and how, I guess, as an artist, you can kind of spur on social change or be part of the conversation of some sort of social change.
Lots of people want to pigeonhole you. I think because you're a young female artist, because you engage with feminist issues, but lots of people call you a feminist artist. Do you ever say that that's what you are?
I'm a feminist and I'm an artist, and I don't really have a problem being called a feminist artist if that's what people want. I think it's, I think it's important to sort of stand by sort of things that are important to kind of, I guess, important to the way that you think and the way that you maneuver around, I guess, being an artist. Yeah, I don't mind.
Gender and race come up in your work a lot, though it's something you dig into, you try to engage with. Can you talk about, I know that you just touched on activism, but can you talk about why you're engaging in those subjects?
I don't know if it's just because of the point I am in sort of like my artistic life, because I feel like I'm definitely at the beginning of what will hopefully be a kind of like, I don't know, a lifelong journey or whatever. But I guess it seems quite relevant to start with yourself, to start looking at what affects you, what affects the people close to you. And so naturally issues to do with gender and race are there, as a mixed race person, as a black person in society, I am immediately racialized. Whether I feel that instinctually in myself or whether it's the experience I've had with my family, it's present. It couldn't be more present than now. I've been in New York for the last couple of months, and almost now on like a 2-weekly basis, we've had this sort of a chilling story about identity, about race, and the ramifications of just walking down the street and, in one skin opposed to another. So yeah, I think those issues sort of maybe coming into my work are just a sort of natural sponge.
Can we talk specifically about a piece you installed at the Cobb Gallery in London, which I think was titled Okay, 3 OKs, which was meant to reference the Ku Klux Klan. And maybe could you describe that piece?
So those were, I guess, essentially like plaster cones with kind of large holes kind of dug out of the inside. And yeah, they began to resemble a sort of a very fractured and probably, I don't know, a disfigured version of a Ku Klux Klan hat. And this is, I guess, kind of like what seems to be happening a lot in my work is that there will be kind of themes that are rolling around that are to do with maybe ideas about activism and, I don't know, sort of like broader themes about the world or whatever. And then there are sort of material concerns. So initially when I was making those pieces, I was interested in being able to create a form that had a real vertiginous kind of feeling of like, of drawing you down, of falling, and making the plaster move in a way that kind of felt like it was jolting forward. And as I began to like sort of work with these different forms, the kind of either a sort of spectre or Ku Klux Klan began to form, and I think that's I guess where the sort of the material play and all of the sort of studio stuff that you do begins to like latch on and glue with the other ideas that are going on.
Someone in a review I read described them as cute, which I found appalling. I mean, appalling on many levels, not least of all because it's a fairly simplistic reading of some complicated work, but also because I don't think if you were a male artist, that word would even come into play.
There are all sorts of words that come into play, as I'm realising as a female artist, that definitely would not be used so readily with a man, but it's kind of, those things are too annoying and frequent to think about too much, I guess.
Another thing that I found interesting and quite difficult in doing research on your practice was that if you do a Google image search of your name, your work doesn't come up, but your face comes up.
Yeah, I know.
Is that something that frustrates you?
It did at first. I've only been doing kind of modelling work and kind of things that might, I mean, a lot of those pictures have actually just might be me at an art opening or a kind of something that isn't, yeah, that is just, I don't know, some weird thing where you get your picture taken. But I've only been sort of doing modelling for 2 years. And at first it was just for money. And now actually, as I'm becoming a little bit better at it, there's sort of some, I don't know, maybe an exhibitionist in me that kind of enjoys it when it's good. But is it frustrating? Yes. But I've just sort of like stopped caring, actively stopped caring, I think.
There's a thing in the art world, though, you know, the idea of the artist as a superstar. And, you know, you're not alone in that. Aaron Young bears the same problem, and he uses it quite carefully. Do you think it's something, I mean, as you just said, that the exhibitionist in you enjoys it? Do you think it's something that you could deploy as part of your work, using your persona to push?
To be honest, it really hasn't. It's something that's often brought up, but it just really hasn't been relevant. It really hasn't felt relevant. It really, for me, especially the way I kind of got into it, it was not so different from having to take a job in a bar or in a shop. It bought me time. You know, I can earn as much money in a day as I might do in 3 or 4 months. So it's been quite a practical thing, to be honest. And also it's like I can be quite objective about the way I look. You know, I've heard this, you know, term beautiful being bandied about since I could understand even what it meant. And it's always been quite maybe an abject or almost seemed like quite a redundant thing. So it's not a surprise to me. And I think that you kind of, I mean, not a surprise, I don't know how to, it's not new. It's not new, whether these pictures were online or whether it's just walking into a room. There are certain assumptions, you know, that are made about the way you look. And I've always thought it was quite peculiar, but I don't know.
It makes sense. You use your body in your work as well. So it is like this, as you said, it's something you're used to, engaging with yourself in a sort of physical way. And I'd love to talk about the collaboration you did, which was a video homage to Bridget Berlin's tit prints.
Yeah.
Can you just talk about that video?
I mean, that video was quite playful, and it actually came because Carly and I were just sort of like quite enamoured when we were watching this particular documentary, because it was John Waters talking over and some phone conversations with Andy Warhol, all talking about these like infamous tit prints. And I guess maybe as a woman, as a young woman, there is a sense of wanting to sort of not just reclaim your body, but, you know, it's used in so many ways by other people, and it's quite exciting to sort of figure out how you might want to manipulate or engage with your own body. And I think that was just quite a fun thing for us to do.
The way it was shot, the vantage point was quite difficult in the I guess if you're thinking about sort of feminist theory and Laura Mulvey's work about narrative cinema and you know, the to be looked at-ness of women and the male gaze and all that, was that deliberate?
I don't think there was like, I mean, when I like framed that up, I think I was just conscious that I didn't want there to be any kind of I wanted it to be quite strongly focused on what the film was about, and I guess quite unflinchingly, which was a conscious thing. I don't know, I can't really think in relation to Laura Mulvey what I guess what the relation is, but yeah, it was very conscious.
Yeah.
And actually it going back onto YouTube, or well, actually it's not allowed, it wasn't at that point allowed on YouTube, but going back into that kind of like video meme sphere, it was quite conscious. It was actually something that I'd done with a lot of previous films that did not have tits in my work, which was to have this very tight crop that's often used on specifically foot fetish films online, and lots of kind of like I guess non-genital sort of fetishes. So like the AMSR videos are all very tight crops on the face, and the foot fetish ones are always a very particularly tight crop on the, I guess it's that sense of like almost like disembodiment and like fracturing the body so that you're kind of like maybe made to feel slightly uncomfortable, even though it might be quite a sexually charged piece.
But do you worry then that you're perpetuating this like traditional exhibitionist role of the woman to be not only looked at but displayed, and then sort of coded for the strongest visual and erotic impact?
Yes, completely. That video had, I think, 30,000 views in the first weekend it was put online. And that's not because people are interested in art. So it's definitely a massive part of, I think, any woman, especially now, using her body, because you know, it's the constant question, am I just contributing to a bank of images that are just constantly growing and constantly potentially disembodying all of us? But I don't think it's a reason to stop.
And is that why though you're focusing more on paintings, as you said at the beginning? Do you think you're moving away from that sort of work? Well,
it's interesting actually, because the paintings they're very much part of the have led on from the films that I was making at the beginning of, I guess, when I started showing my work and stuff, and I use my body in them. You know, they're made on the floor, and I kind of in various ways end up crawling across the canvas. Even if I'm using brushes, they are very my whole body is very much engaged. So actually, maybe it's felt like a way of leaving a trace and using my body in a less graphic but maybe more effective way, especially in relation to, I guess, maybe a previous generation of artists of whom's work I really love, someone like Janine Anthony, who kind of the active body was very much almost part of the end work, was perhaps trying to do something similar, but actually remove the body completely from the actual final image that you see or final thing that you experience.
Can we, following on from that, talk about the use of the word cunt in your work?
Cunt is the first text piece really I've done, and the first word I've worked with, and I was sort of drawn to it on a lot of levels. It seemed like the most seductive word to potentially use and the most effective. I started thinking about it as being potentially the only anarchic word left, because it is banned from a lot of our print media and online media, and it's still very much a word that is potentially contentious and but like much loved. And I kind of like, I was interested in its use as this sort of like reclaimed word for feminists, some feminists, but then also something that gets, banded around inanimate objects and is very much part of, like, I don't know, car abuse culture, and like, just that can be a word that's full of so much pleasure. It's one of the first, I guess, swear words I probably knew and really enjoyed. My mum definitely used it a lot. That was like, I kind of like, I liked that it has the same effect and meaning, whether it's if there's a politicized sort of like energy behind it, or whether you're literally just screaming it at someone.
It means massively different things in the US than
really?
It does in the UK. Yeah, it's not, in the US, if you say it, it's literally the worst thing you could possibly say. And when I came to England, I was shocked by how many people would just say it.
Yeah. And also, I don't know if it's like, if it's different with different groups of people. Like, my parents are both very, very Cockney. And I sometimes have to catch myself because I realise that when they use it, it sounds completely different to how maybe it does when I use it. And actually, I was speaking to an artist who grew up in Qatar, and I think it's a very similar word. I think it looks like Kanto, but she was telling me that when it's used, she came to my studio once. She was like, "What's with all your aggro art?" And I was trying to explain the same thing to her, and she was saying that it's like if any word has a spell in it, that's the word. She said that if a man says it on the street there, it's sort of like everyone sort of, is chilled and goes silent. It's like, and I was interested in that power of it, the power of its multiplicity, I guess.
I'm pleased you brought up aggro, because, in looking at your work, you have to go back through the people that have come before you, right? The Tracy Emin and her aggression, and even before Tracy, someone like Judith Bernstein, who sort of had the last word on male aggression. Do you see yourself as fitting in
the aggro lineage?
Yeah.
I guess the frank answer is yes, but also I think there's an element of trying to challenge what a powerful representation of a sort of female energy is, because I think actually it's not aggression. It can be very intense. It can deal with sort of desire. But actually, Tracy Emin's work, a lot of it is just powerful. It's about emotions and feelings. And is it actually aggro, or is it that we just don't like what she's saying?
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess the same could be said of Bernstein. One of her favorite, or my favorite,
doesn't she
pieces.
do Comp Face?
Yeah. And Fun Gun, which is a penis, erect penis that's got a hammer and a trigger attached to it. So it's all about, right, the phallus and the power of the phallus.
And again, I guess the sort of implication of that is like, who is it aggressive to? I don't have a penis, so it's not going to make me scream, but it's going to make, if you do have one, I can imagine that being quite brutal. So it's like, again, it's like who's feeling the aggression and who's actually just trying to push something that's powerful.
Do you think your work's autobiographical?
Not directly, no. Not by the time of its end point. I guess all work starts from some kind of personal biography. But at its end point, it's just hopefully thinking about something that's a lot bigger than me, and that's a lot more universal, I think.